I'm Elise and I run an organisation called Leadership Space, and 2 seconds on why this is something I know something about. The Leadership Space, what do? We're all about helping social purpose organisations to navigate through growth and through change. That growth can mean I'm going from a $600,000 organisation to $1 million, or I'm going from $1 million to 40 million. Or change can mean I've got to innovate, I'm merging, we need a new culture, we've got changes in leadership. Any of those things for us fall into this navigating leadership and change. And we do all these things up there to help you do that, because if you're going to navigate through leadership, through growth and through change, you need to be able to pull your levers of leadership and your people levers, strategy and culture, and the collective, the capacity of teams to work together. So that's what I'm really passionate about. Here's my beautiful team, and we've been around for 10 years, and we've worked with kind of roughly this many organisations. And what's different about us is that we are coach facilitators. We're not consultants. We're all trained PCC, which stands for Professionally Certified Coaches. So I'm going to get to the Anablep in a minute. Hold your breaths if you don't. Who knows what an Anablep is? Oh, there's a few hands. Okay, excellent. Don't tell your neighbour. Second show of hands. Who thinks of the board as a team? Whoa, awesome. Half my work is done. So when you are doing strategy, the opportunity of strategy is both for team building, and I don't mean the rah-rah kind, but collective leadership, as in team functioning, and culture building alongside strategy. It is one of the most unique opportunities in your calendar to accelerate and strengthen your capacity as a collective when you do strategy. So I like these two quotes. Famous Mr. Patrick Lencioni, if you're into team stuff, he's got a lovely little diagram that lots of people refer to. So not finance, not strategy, not technology. It is teamwork that remains the ultimate competitive advantage, both because it is so powerful and so rare. And no matter how brilliant your mind or strategy, if you're playing a solo game, you will always lose out to a team. So how does this relate to an Anablep? So an Anablep is a real fish. Here's my real Anablep fish. It lives in South America, and it has 4 eyes. 2 of its eyes are above the water, and 2 of its eyes are below the water. It's scanning below for food, and it's scanning above for prey. And it's a really lovely metaphor for this notion that when we are doing something that is a what, which is strategy, we also can be doing some and must be doing, actually, I would argue, some very important how things. Under the water, above the water. So that's our little metaphor. Isn't he cute? I've been using him for about 15 years. He's very, very old. So let's build on this idea. What does that mean? And get really practical about how do we use this insight to actually accelerate the opportunity. So there is a model for team performance from a guy called Professor Peter Hawkins, who, in my opinion, is the global thought leader on how we do collective leadership. And this is his model, and it's very relevant for how you think about boards and strategy. So I'm going to share it with you, then I'm going to dig in, I'm going to give you some questions that you can ask in each of the quadrants, and we're going to share some case studies, and I'm going to get you to have a chat to your neighbour. So let's start with just the model first. Of course it's a 4x4, because where would the world be without a 4x4? So in the north is our task, our what. In the south is our people process, the how. Over on the right-hand side, if you want these slides, by the way, I'm very happy to send them to you. You do not have to take photos and try and recreate what I'm about to give you. Just shoot me an email. It's at the end, and I will send everything to you. So, inside the organisation, inside the team, outside the organisation, outside the team. Yeah, you can apply whatever is relevant. So that's our 4 quadrants, which gives us our first one. So I'll try and stop turning around. So task and outside is looking at, he calls it commissioning. If you were going to commission an artwork, think of the way we talk about commissioning an artwork, it's that kind of notion, yeah? So if I was to commission the board for your organisation to do something, it would be external, which is the outside piece. It would be external stakeholders, your members, your participants, your customers, your partners. They would say, please create a board and make it do these things, right? It's really important that it does these things. And the team, it needs to be able to do these things. That's what's important. So that's what we're thinking about in commissioning. We're talking about what is it that, who are our stakeholders first of all? Who are our most important stakeholders? Not everybody we've ever met, but who are our most important stakeholders? And what is it that they want from us? And what do they expect from us? This connects into, do you remember, for those of you that were here yesterday, and Samuel Wilson talked about one of the orange dots that the charity sector got, and it was about connecting to stakeholders and our this is this, yeah? This is, are we doing a good enough job? And it's quadrant 1 and quadrant 4 that this relates to, yeah? So there's a real life application. If we did this really well, we want that orange dot to turn green. So we'll talk a bit more about it and what that means. So that's what's in quadrant 1. Quadrant 2, so we're up in task still, but now we're facing internally. So we go, okay, stakeholders, we've heard you, this is what you want from us to do, you want us to deliver. Now we turn internally to the organisation and we say, okay, well that turns up in a strategy. This is where strategy falls out. This is our purpose. This is also where the evolving, varying and roles and clarity between the board and the executive. What's your job? What's my job? We started out, around the kitchen table. We got more and more evolved. Where's that line? It's moving. It's not a permanent thing. It's moving as we grow and change. So that falls into this clarifying piece too. So we need to really understand what it is we're here to do. This is where theory of change fits too. So everything that is about grounding what I hear and the world needs from me, clarifying it and grounding in what I do. And then this is where co-creating is where our traditional team building kind of idea came from, right? This is how we used to think of team building. It's like this is all about, and it's in the old days it was even far narrower than this. But the co-creating is now how do we as a collective create value across the executive, across the board? How do we create value in the way that we operate, in the conversations that we have, in our ability to challenge each other? Can we hold each other accountable? Can I give you feedback on how that's landed? How are we bringing our culture to life? Yeah, all of this sits in that quadrant of co-creating. Make sense? And the last one in the 4 is, okay, now I know what I need to do. I've grounded in practicalities. I'm living it and operating in line with our culture. Now I need to take all that value and I need to deliver it in the world. Think about this as like I'm on the football field, in the training room in the co-creating, and then I step onto the football field in the connecting. We go out, the CEO's doing a media thing and the board's having a meeting with a funder and we're talking to government. We're out, we're dispersed. We have to take that value, represent it and deliver it live while we're playing the game. That's our connecting piece. And the last piece in the middle is the world that we need to be successful in 6 months, 12 months, 5 years is different from the one we're in today. If we're not building our capability, if we're not growing, if we're not at things like this, learning, reflecting, thinking about doing professional development, then we won't be ready to meet the challenge that we face down the line. So the piece of just constant learning, which you guys are all clearly committed to because you're here. Congratulations, ticked the middle. So what does all that mean? So as I said here, in the training room and on the field, this is our stakeholders and this is where strategy fits. So if you think about what that looks like and the kind of work that we do is as coaches, what we're saying is, how do you become and be this as you move forward? So let me ground this in a couple of case studies for you about what this looks like in practice. So one example that I wanted to, there's kind of two ways that you can look at this, two kind of broad examples that I wanted to share with you. One of them is where you're going into strategy, and when I'm saying strategy, I'm thinking about before you have a strategic planning workshop, in the workshop itself, and then delivering strategy afterwards. Yeah, so the whole continuum of before, middle, and after when I'm talking about strategy. So some of the things that we see and the ways that you can bring this to life, if you think about an organisation, my two examples are one where there's an external need that's particularly high and one where there's an internal need that's perhaps particularly high. So I'm going to read these so I don't miss pieces. So see if any of this resonates for you and whether you can see yourself in any of these examples. So example one, perhaps we need to engage we need more money, maybe government, maybe funding. So we go into strategy and we say, okay, yes, we need a strategy at the end, however, we also need to engage our stakeholders who are funding us, which is our quadrant one. We need more community engagement and support for our sustainability. Maybe our stakeholder groups are changing, our membership's changing, we just really value the voice of lived experience, we want to connect with it more. We have perhaps third-party organisations who need to feel like they own and have a stake in what we're doing. Maybe our board is well-meaning but perhaps not as engaged, or there are people on the board who are not as engaged. Maybe we're very engaged, but we've got some really big strategic choice points to make. So if you were faced with any of those kinds of context markers, how can this inform your approach? Well, part of what we notice is the quality of the listening exercise that you do before you walk into your strategy day can make a really big difference. So who are we listening to? Who are we asking for an opinion of before we walk into the strategy? And how are we using this as an opportunity to ask and engage and connect and strengthen relationships? Who do you want to pick up the phone to that this is a wonderful opportunity to do it? And say, from a place of neutrality and curiosity, I'm really interested. What do you think we should be achieving for the next 3 or 5 years? What do you think I don't see or I don't know? What are the relationships that I want to build? I've got an opportunity now to tell you that I'm doing strategic planning and make sure you know how thoughtful I am. Can I take advantage of this opportunity to, as Samuel was saying, strengthen my reputation in the marketplace? Yeah, so this listening piece gives us a really nice opportunity to do that. For the board, the listening piece is, from our perspective, a lot of what we find organisations are engaging us for is we're having a conversation that's not just a what do you think the answer is, but how are you showing up? How are you contributing? How are you aligning? It's not uncommon, and I say this with a genuine trepidation, but it's not uncommon for people after we've done an exercise to decide that they don't belong on the board anymore. Like, one chair was like, I can't believe you literally walked out of the room and he called me 5 minutes later. Like, I've been trying to do this for like 3 years. How did you do it? But if you ask the right questions of people, this is an opportunity to help you attract people who you think should be on your board and help people who really shouldn't be there anymore to make the brave, kind decision. And it's not a nasty one. It's like, are you in this? How much are you contributing? Is it a good fit for where you're at with your life? So these are kind of these subtle pieces. We want to engage people through the strategy process. Dial up the engagement, yeah, that you walk out of the strategic process and you have got a movement happening where the best people are being attracted in, the best supporters are being attracted in, and the people who need to really go are being helped off the bus with total respect and kindness and care, because it's always, in my experience, the right thing for them and you. Always. It's always a gift. The number of chairs who've said to me, thank you, I was scared that I couldn't leave because the organisation would fall over if I wasn't there. And now I feel like, oh, I can do the right thing by me and my family and the organisation. Yeah, we've got to trust that we're going to get the right people in. But strategy is a really important opportunity to do that. The engagement piece of funders and community is profound. We had an organisation a little while ago and they were on a complete precipice. They were absolutely heading for a cliff. And we designed the strategy process to get all the people that needed to be on the bus in there, and they got 4 years worth of funding from the strategy process. Everybody was so touched and engaged by the experience that actually their funding was sorted. So there is real gains to be made by thinking about who you engage and how you engage them. I'm going to get you to think about this in a minute and stop talking. So the multi-stakeholder offsite, that's the at the thing piece. The co-created strategy. And if you're working in Indigenous communities or First Nations communities anywhere, it is so important that this is genuinely co-created. And I think coming in with the principles of co-creation and how are we doing this with you and not to you, and how are we doing it with everybody and engaging we'll talk about the internal more in a minute. So that's that piece. That's the external piece where we've got a real opportunity to engage the external environment in new ways. Let's flip to the internal. So, what are some of the things we see on the internal? Maybe, and they're not all on the negative side, they're often opportunities, but maybe we have more internal silos than we would like to have. Maybe people are sort of working and, in their own direction. Maybe there's some nervousness and tension about where the organisation is going and who might be left behind. So, we've worked with organisations where actually there's a real strategic question about, have we diversified too much? And we're now doing this, and we're doing this, and we're doing this, and does it all fit together? And people get really nervous going into strategy that actually someone's going to be told they're not on the bus anymore who really wants to be, yeah? So that can be something that is something to address and be aware of as you walk in. Maybe there's some anxiety about how certain people will behave. If there's been, we've been in pretty intense situations where the board is like, we can't have the staff because I don't feel confident they're going to behave well. Or the staff are saying, well, I would like to go there, but I don't trust the board. Or I don't trust members of the board. Or I feel nervous because I feel like they don't really value my opinion, right? All these culture and leadership niggles that can be low lying and quiet, or they can be really loud. This is like pause, pull 2 levers. Do your Anablep, what's above? What do I need to gain internally that I can use this process to really wire and knit together the organisation and create greater levels of strength where perhaps it doesn't exist as much? What are some of the other pieces? We also hear that, strategy's been done before. We get brought in more times than I would like, off the back of a large Big 4 company or someone, and everyone's like, well, we have a strategy, but nobody understands it. So I don't want to do it again. And the board's saying, oh no, well, we've already got it. We did it in the thing, and we've got that big piece of, remember that big, no. But nobody's looking at it, no. So it's like, I don't want to do it again. But actually there's buy-in. The whole point of strategy is you get buy-in and everybody knows what to do. So if you've come through the other side of the strategy and everybody doesn't feel really engaged and connected, then you've kind of missed the point. So there is some need to go back and re-engage people. So that we hear that sometimes as part of the reason of what are we solving for, if you like. And we've had cases too where the organisation says, well, and I think Stephen or Michael might have talked about this yesterday, where you've got operational plans, but no overarching strategy. And, we've been called in and the organisation said, well, we've got like 5 bottom-up developed plans, and there is no way I'm turning around to all those lovely people who've just spent all this time developing it and tell them that we're doing it again. So, but how do you link it, right? Because you've now just created silos where people are all running off in their own directions and nobody's connected, yeah? So how do you do it when you've got that kind of challenge? So, again, I think the way that you use strategy to kind of strengthen and repair some of that, or just to take you to the next level, that piece and the way you design who's being asked to participate. Is it a survey? Have you got interviews? Who's being spoken to? Are you running focus groups? Is the strategy process, and I'm talking about it as being facilitated, but you can do this internally. You know, you have a team meeting and you have a staff meeting, and how are you engaging people so that they feel like and are really addressing their concerns about how we do this and how we make it engaging and how we connect people to the process. So designing that piece is really, really important. I think there's also opportunities, and we do this quite a lot, when you then think about the offsite itself, how do you design that? So maybe you bring, you know, the depending on how large your organisation is, but you bring multiple levels and you think about it from a matrix perspective. So maybe you have your First Nations lead there, even though they're not on the executive team. Maybe you have someone who doesn't seem to make sense, but actually is a really important stakeholder in this. Yeah, so thinking about who's in the room and how you design it. We often front end our strategic planning days or half days with something that strengthens connectivity. So doing what kind of team do we want to belong to exercise. What are our values, and what are some behaviours that we're really proud of that we're doing, and what do we need to do a bit less of? What, again, that question of role. What's the role of the board and the exec? You know, taking 2 hours, and I'm not talking about loads of time, but in 2 hours, if you can do something meaningful that strengthens the invisibles, the below the line stuff about how do we feel about each other, do I trust you, do I feel heard, have I been asked to vision, have I been invited to tap into why I'm here and what I care about and how we're all connected to each other. The quality of your conversation will be just completely next level. We often use conversational intelligence too, which is some beautiful work around how do we understand that we all need to look after each other's brains and how much cortisol and oxytocin is flowing around, and making it explicit that if we build this conversational intelligence and talk about what's happening for me when I get triggered or I go into an away state, and how do we talk to each other in a way that is going to maximise the quality of our conversation, and then you have the big conversation, it's a completely different vibe, right? And you walk out going, wow, we feel like we have done something meaningful together, and we feel a sense of belonging and connectedness. We have become a team, especially if you think about that, the whole matrix, and you go, you can do some of those activities, you know? Who are our top stakeholders? What's this strategy? Who is it that it needs to serve? What do they want from this strategy? Let's pause first and ask, are we serving them? Is everyone, we'll have, a lot of the time we see conflict emerging between people, and it's actually stakeholder conflict. And if we can make that explicit, then it becomes clear to me that you don't have an issue with me, but I'm telling you the funder needs this, and you're telling me government needs this, and I'm telling you that our end user needs this, and so we end up feeling like we're on different teams. But actually, if we can take collective responsibility for identifying who are our top stakeholders and what do they need from us, we're suddenly all on the same team again. And we can actually start resolving, well, how do we resolve these? We have to own all this as an organisation, right? All these and it is so much more complex in the social purpose space than it is in the commercial space, right? Because there's all these disconnections between who's giving us the money and who wants the thing, and right, like, so it's complex. So there's some examples of, is there anything else I wanted to say about that? I don't think so. So what I'm going to invite you to do is, here are some prompt questions to help you think about where might the gains be for you. Oh, I'm completely out of time, aren't I? No. I'm not? Oh, excellent. Oh, brilliant. Thank you. Oh, thank you. I've got a timer. I've got helpers. I feel so supported. So what I would like you to do is please turn to a neighbour or two. Is there a question on there that you could take into your board? And it can be about strategy implementation. It doesn't have to be about I have to develop a strategy. It might be there's a long tail on implementation, and there's a long tail on constantly reflecting on what's the strategic question for now. So is there anything on there that you go, that would be a really great little tidbit that I could stick in my back pocket and walk out of here and go, I'm going to add some value to my leadership and culture by thinking about it in this way. So I will give you, 5 minutes, something like that. I'll see how I'll read the room. But have a conversation and see what are you already doing and what would be useful. And for the people who are online, take a piece of paper or talk to your neighbour. All right, off you go. Okay, let's hear some of what you discussed. So, we have a little phrase, which is that whoever's doing the talking is doing the learning, right? So, I don't need to learn it. But I'd really love, there's always wisdom in the room. There's always wisdom in the room, and there is always learnings for other people about whatever you're thinking about. So, in the spirit of the fact that you've now hung out together for 2 days, I'd love to hear, is there anything that you heard your friend and neighbour say that was interesting, gave you pause? Is there anything that you think would be useful for other people to think about? Who's willing to? I have to give you the microphone because of the thing, but please don't let that put you off. Thank you. Oh, you're volunteering your neighbour. I'm not sure she's so into that.
So the three of us had the chat, and it was around the balance between the CEO and the board, and understanding that process. A lot of our organizations, the board is essentially the members of the organization as well, because we are NFPs, no shareholders. Yeah. The board is the board members are the members of the organization, and yep. Hardly any outside members. Yep. So it can create certain governance issues, and it's about making sure that the board members as well as the senior management understand that process.
Wonderful. Did you want to add anything, Helen?
No, we're a small organisation, and meaning small like government funded, but 10 employees, and then we have the management committee and the CEO. There's a lot. What I think is important for us is the trust.
Yes.
As management committee, we really trust the CEO, but we also have that fine line between having the right people on the management committee, or board, if you call it that ask the right questions at that level. But that sometimes can be a bit grey sometimes too with the roles. Yeah. I mean, we can come from the AICD, governance, management roles, but however, it's how people perceive their roles as well that's important.
Yeah, absolutely. Anything?
No, I just think it's an interest. Sorry. The only other thing I'd add is that I think it is really important to have a clear discussion around clarifying roles. I think that has been the takeaway message from this session for me, so that we're all on the same page and that we all understand which lane we're in and how then we all come together and connect at the end or during the process, I suppose. Yeah,
absolutely. And I think I would add to that make it, again, if you're thinking just as this is a clarifying task, if you're just in quadrant 2 where it's task, then you just want the clarity. If you are thinking this is a leadership and culture opportunity, you're thinking quality of conversation, and you're down in co-creating, which is how do we come together and have a conversation together that leaves trust higher than when we entered, as well as we're never sacrificing the outcome. We're always getting the clarity, but we're like, how do we accelerate the invisibles at the same time. Yeah? Yeah, great. Thank you so much. Such an important conversation. And I think the idea that it's obvious what the answer is a little bit less helpful.
Thanks very much. And Mike Speeder from Psych Safety Solutions.
Lovely to meet you,
I'll
Mike.
sit down. My neighbours were talking about the vital importance of the very first thing, who are our priority stakeholders, but most importantly, what does success look like from their eyes?
Yes.
And that we talked about the importance of just being able to truly listen and to have the humility to put aside our own preconceptions. I raised an example. I was a manager of corporate strategy for a large organisation in the past, and I went to the CEO when they were asking me to take the role. I said, I can do the classical stuff, but the real need here is the relational strategy, really engaging in that way. So I think we had a common common cause on our discussion.
Yeah,
Thank
lovely.
you.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for sharing that, Mike. We do an exercise. Human beings are experiential and we're storytellers, right? So if you really want to experience what your stakeholders are saying, you can listen, but sometimes you don't have the budget for that, or it's time consuming. There's a really easy way where you can, when we're doing team development or with boards sometimes, we'll say, break into groups. First of all, let's work out who are our priority stakeholders, break into groups. Now say I want you to speak in the first person. I am a funder and what I need from you is this. You will hear it differently when you hear it in the I. First of all, it'll hit you in your heart. Like you feel a sense of responsibility to hear that voice. And if you get people who are working with those stakeholders to give you that voice and to tell you what they're hearing, you will have a level of empathy for them and what it feels like to be on the receiving end of that request in a way that you won't if you talk about it as a they. They want this, they want that, those people over there are saying, right? Like there's an I in this. I want this from you. It matters to me that you look after my reputation as a funder. I want to know that this is going to be easy, says government. Don't make it hard for me, right? Fill in my form, do the thing I need, make me look good. Yeah, you hear it differently. Thank you so much, Mike. Did anyone have any questions or anything as well as part of this? Because I can click over to Q&A, but you don't need to see the Q&A slide. Or any other, I'd love to hear, is there any other bits and pieces that you picked out of that you thought would be useful? Thank you. Hang on, I have to give you this thing. I'm under strict instructions. Kate, it's not my fault.
In the example you were just talking about framing things in the I, is that actual funders and actual stakeholders, or is it a role play?
It's a role play.
Great, okay.
It's a role play.
That's what I thought. Interesting. Yeah, interesting.
The role play piece. Because, again, this is what happens if you put a coach at the front of the room, especially one trained in therapy. We do, when we're trying to resolve tensions, we need to be in our humanness, right? We need to be in our experience. Because otherwise we're up here in our head and the kinds of insights we have are only partial. They're not complete. And then we go and give the answer to the poor person who has to implement it. But if we didn't embody the problem, we didn't embody the solution. So we need to be in it to have real insight and be really able to kind of go, okay, I think what it is that you're saying above the water is this, but is what under the water is going on this? Is that what you're struggling with? Is that what's hard? You know, where is trust getting knocked around? Or, yeah? And then we can go in and set a strategy where we really feel like we've got our hands and arms around the nature of the challenges and opportunities, and we can take the organisation forward. Yeah, that locked in arms. Thank you so much, Kate. How am I doing? Time? Gosh, that says 3 minutes, 9 minutes, somewhere between 3 and 9 minutes. Might get it all over the place. Okay. Oh, okay. Thank you. or another discussion. Any other questions? Any questions at all? I don't think I've had any questions yet. Anything that, yes. Tim.
Hi, Elise. Tim Short from Hobart. I was interested, the really simple comment you made early in your presentation about the power of listening before you go into strategy session. Do you have an example or one that really resonated with you where you thought, wow, that's an amazing sort of listening exercise that organisation has gone through to lead them into that strategy process?
Yeah, thanks, Tim. I mean, for us, in a way, I would consider that we haven't done our job unless every single one of the projects we work on has been an amazing listening exercise. And so the questions in the listening exercise are who? Who is it important that we speak to? How is it important that we speak to them? Are we meeting? Thank you. Are we sending them a survey? That's a listening exercise. That's completely appropriate for some people in your stakeholder group to just get a survey. Are we, from a financial perspective in terms of budgeting projects, for us as facilitators, we'll say, we're going to just drop into one of your exec teams, we want to hear half an hour. We're going to spend half an hour listening to your exec team, and that's our listening exercise. For us, the design piece in your listening is really important because the question is, what problem do you think you're solving? And that tells you who you're listening to and how you're listening to them. And for us, we're trying to fast track other things alongside strategy so that you get to the end of the process and you're like, oh, we solved this problem, this problem, this problem, this problem, right? So yeah, it's focus group, your tools, focus groups, individual conversations, surveys, listening to who you're talking to, going out and having when I talk about the organisation that walked out with 4 years worth of funding, that was a series of conversations that the chair started that were passed to us to bring the funders into the room so that they really felt like we really understood what they thought where this organisation was floundering, why it wasn't getting the money that they thought they should, and what they needed to do to address it. And part of that was that when we designed the strategy session, we had really good representation. This organisation needed First Nations representation, CALD, cultural and linguistic diversity. It needed people in the room for this funder to say, you've got legitimacy in my eyes again. I believe that you can take this issue forward in a way that I'm going to trust. And as I look around the room, I go, okay, all right then, I'll support it. Yeah. Yes, Rachel.
Hello, I'm Rachel. It's brought up a wondering for me around when you talk about priority stakeholders around the actual beneficiary. Mm-hmm. So I suspect that we all have one primary stakeholder, and that is the person or the animal or the environmental issue right at the centre of our challenges.
Yes.
And I do see that it's hard for organisations. It does take time and money to listen to the beneficiaries and truly understand what they want and need, and then sometimes those wants and needs change over time. So my question is, how do organisations do it? How do we as servants to those beneficiaries do it regularly, do it well, but then we obviously have to do it very efficiently also, because I suspect that spending money on understanding our beneficiaries' needs is a capacity cost that funders don't like to fund.
Yeah, no, it is, and it's part of that listening exercise and engagement, and it's also at the back end. So there's this, again, the piece, if we think of strategy as having a before, middle and afterwards, that, and other people have talked about it at this conference too. I think Stephen did yesterday. You have to see strategic behaviour as an embedded capability in your organisation, not a thing you do once in a while. So how are you constantly listening to your beneficiaries? How are you making sure that voice is present? I think my experience is that I think organisations generally do that piece better, the beneficiary listening piece, than they do the other bits. It's the other bits that are usually weaker. It's not the case for all organisations by any means, but the bit that the piece where it usually breaks is that the people who are doing the beneficiary listening are too far away from the people who are doing the decision making. So that is teaming, because if I see that if my executive team, and however big you are, maybe you're a group of 10 and you're really close to it, but how are we empowering and creating a place where communication is flowing beautifully in all directions and we all feel part of the same team, then my frontline people are listening. They know that the exec and the management are listening, and that, you know, that all that information is flowing really nicely backwards and forwards, and that we know if we haven't got a mechanism for really knowing what's happening on the front line, that we actually address it, you know, early. And again, yeah, strategy is a great way to go signal, we're going to do something differently. I mean, like, for me, the excitement of strategy is new chapter. So I get to rewrite the rules. If I've been doing various things reasonably crappily, now I get to say, look, new era, I'm going to do it differently. And all the ways in which I develop this strategy tell you that I'm legitimate, and build your trust in me that I really am going to do it differently, because I'm actually doing the whole process in a way that I haven't done it before. So, yeah, I think that's the excitement.
We have one more question over here. There was one person over this side.
Thank you.
Oh, sorry, I talked too much. I had too much space to fill now. No.
My name's Joe Paranella from
Joe.
Better Together Community Support, Atherton Tablelands, North Queensland. I'd like to give just one example of how we did do a project that goes in line with everything you're saying, but I suppose we did the reverse, because we were in a corner, we couldn't get out of it, and what happened was we identified a problem in our community, a real need within our community. Luckily, our organisation quite financial. We couldn't get funding to go ahead with this actual project, and so we put our own money up front, and we were able to prove, because we put enough money up front to run it for 12 months, and we were able to prove that the need was there, and from that going, we actually got 3 years government funding after that. Fantastic. But we worked in exactly what you were saying. It was the board.
You did it first and then you
That's
strategized.
Exactly right. That was the only way we could get it up.
Yeah.
We felt that was the
Brilliant.
most number one
Absolutely.
priority.
Agile.
Yet it wasn't identified from anywhere else. But we knew it was there. We knew we had to do it. We did it that way.
Brilliant.
And ended up with a fantastic result.
Absolutely.
But 3 years funding from there.
Fantastic.
And it wouldn't have come if we hadn't have funded it ourselves.
That's right. And I think that brings up another really important point. I know there's another question here.
Was there one?
Was there?
I was just going to ask something about Lencioni, but it's fine.
Okay. I think that brings up another really important point for me. Like, we work with organisations of every size, from grassroots with 3 people to, 1,500 staff and tens of millions of turnover. And where you are, and I mean, this is not really directly related to this, but it's just such a bounce off what you were just saying. For us, a strategy is a strategy on a page, first of all, and that strategy might be 6 months, it might be 12 months, it might be a year. It depends what you're solving for. So we are massive advocates for there is no right answer, there is what is useful. And we work with organisations who are changing so fast that if they do a 6-month plan, they finished it in 3 months, we've done the 12 months, they're sprinting, right? And we call them strategic sprints. So, again, that's an engagement opportunity to make sure everybody, there's no point taking so long to develop a strategy if it's only 6 months and, you've already moved, right? You need people to know what that says so that they're implementing it by the time they walk in the door tomorrow morning. So, yeah. Okay, we're done. Thank you so much. Here, we did that. This is me. Feel free to shoot me a message. I would love to hear from you. Feel free to connect on LinkedIn. And if you wanted the slides, just email me and we'll shoot them off to you. So thank you so much for being an amazing audience, participants. It was great. Thank you.